Members of Delhi Shilpi Chakra had made themselves well known, were considered as household names, and had established themselves with great dignity and power. K.S. Kulkarni was born in Belgaum and he studied at J.J. School of Art. In 1943, he came away to Delhi and at the art department of Delhi Polytechnic, he took up the teaching position. Kulkarni's paintings are in a typical modernist style. He developed a visual language that was in consonance with the demands made by the development of Indian modernity, particularly in the 1950s. He said that whether his inspiration was folk or tribal or spiritual, but it was the material from which his creativity emanated. And his vision was universal in character, and he derived his inspiration from the life around him. It is interesting to see as to how Kulkarni develops his style, and the glance at his oeuvre very clearly establishes that he worked in a variety of styles, in a variety of artistic lexicon, and he developed a visual language that was figurative and also quasi abstract. He was influenced by Amrita Shergill, as many of his paintings show, and he had the capacity of reducing his forms and objects that he saw in nature to its basic essentials. Form was something which fascinated Kulkarni, and it is the form that he manipulated in various ways. Form that could relate directly to life as identifiable or as something that could be abstract but containing the essence of his ideas and his intellectual approach. Many of Kulkarni's works have a radical approach in the way he structures his composition. Some of the works clearly shows this, and a very strong cubist influence also manifests his works. So in this respect, Kulkarni's works has a wide range of subject matter, and according to his experiences and according to the exigencies of the moment or when he is encountering his canvas, we find that he created paintings that were of that particular moment. And in that respect, he was very much a modernist, uh, clearly putting on his canvas his empirical experiences as well as his perceptions of the world. His colors have been strikingly dynamic. At the same time, he had the capacity to subtly also add nuanced tones and tints to his compositions. So his compositions were semi-abstract as well as also quasi-realistic. And Kulkarni established himself as a household name within the history of India's modernity. Besides being one of the founder members of Delhi Shilpi Chakra, he was also the founder member of Triveni Kala Sangam, and he also served as its art director for quite some time. So Kulkarni's works are typically in a modernist tradition, those that were related to his environment, and that it was possible for an ordinary layperson to identify with it. Dhanraj Bhagat. Dhanraj Bhagat is that special name within the domain of India's modernity, a pioneering, innovative sculptor who interfaced with craft traditions and mediums to create his own compositions. He was born in Lahore and he studied at the Mayo School of Art. He came from an economically poor background, so he didn't complete his school. But Mayo School of Art offered diploma in clay modeling when he realized that his predilection lay in creating art forms. He joined the classes there. Within a year, he was also offered a scholarship to finish one more year. And looking at his good works and the kind of originality that he manifested and a very different approach, He was also given a teaching position. But the calamity of separation of families in 1947 made Dhanraj Bhagat come away to Delhi, where he took up a job at the art department of Delhi Polytechnic. And when this art department was bifurcated to create a Delhi School of Art in 1964, Dhanraj Bhagat was given the designation of a professor and the head of the sculpture department. Importance of Dhanraj Bhagat as a sculptor lies in the fact that he not only interacted and interfaced with traditional materials as clay, the amorphous nature of which he found it very uninspiring, until he found wood, and that inspired him to create many sculptures that bear the characteristic of the material in the way he molded it, carved it, left the textured, chiseled marks on it. Later on, in a typical modernist tradition, he also made use of various modern materials: cement, concrete, aluminium, copper, brass. And in his visual language, he was influenced by Archipenko, a Russian-American sculptor, Cubist sculptor, who seems to have made a deep impression on his sensibility. Chadwick, a British sculptor, inspired him to work in many medium. So primarily or fundamentally, his visual language became Cubist in character. So he created many works. Some of the works which he created before coming away to Delhi were those of women, very graceful, sensuous, with flowing lines, etc. But after post-partition and the calamity and the suffering, despair and the hardship that he noticed among many of those when the exodus happened, there was a shift in his style. And of course, the modern Western artistic tradition also influenced his work, as mentioned by the influence of Archipenko. Dhanraj Bhagat, in a way, not only created forms, but he also constructed his sculptures. And this is where he basically marks a posture of difference and a distinction. He would use various materials, or he would just use one or two materials, and then he would hammer it, meld them together, uh, and fuse them together and created forms that were typically two-dimensional in appearance, because it only had a frontal view and it was not possible to get a full view from the back. It was this kind of a frontal pictorial sculptures that he created was to have a large impact on many of the sculptors of the Madras modern, when they created sculptures whereby they also constructed rather than molding it or modeling it or casting it. So Dhanraj Bhagat in that respect was a pioneer who influenced a different movement in sculpture in Madras. So in that respect, he continued to create a large number of sculptures, particularly his Nataraja, which he created, is amazing in the way he was able to essentialize the dynamic dance of the god through a few lines and gave it that kind of a visual appearance that a glance itself shows that this is Nataraja. So that was his capacity, that he could reduce a form to its essentials without losing out on its character and appearance. Another work which he did was that of Mahakal, where he has a huge head, elongated head, quite terrified looking, with many of the human forms falling out of its mouth. And that perhaps was a result of the depression of the exodus of 1947, where time does not stand still and what time does was what he had it represented. Then another very graceful and a very poetically evocative work that Dhanraj Bhagat created was a Veena player. It was to his intellectual capacity that one should give it, that he could look at the form and through a series of drawings and sketches, he would reduce it to just a few lines as it is made evident in his Veena player. So in this respect, Dhanraj Bhagat remains a pioneering sculptor who seems to have influenced a whole generation of many sculptors after him. And even today, he remains a name and an artist, a sculptor to reckon with. Later on, when he was not able to handle the material in his advanced age, he had taken to drawing and painting. And these drawing and paintings are equally fascinating as were his sculptures. So Kulkarni and Dhanraj Bhagat, both of them have made a notable contribution to the development of India's modernity.